Dr.Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in it. This spring semester, many faculty and students are making the transition from online to in-person instruction. Is this the return to normal we've all been waiting for? What has it been like teaching during the pandemic? And what are the challenges students and faculty face now? Join us as I speak with 4 college faculty about the state of the art of teaching over the last 2+ years, what they've learned and what we all still need to know. Coming up now on EdCast. I am pleased to be joined by faculty who have been teaching and working during the COVID crisis. Charles Rice Gonzalez is an assistant professor in the English department at Hostos Community College. He is a writer, longtime LGBTQ activist, and co-founder of BAD, the Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance. A widely published author, Professor Rice Gonzalez's novel, Chulito, was recognized by the American Library Association and the National Book Critics Circle. He is the chair of the board for the Bronx Council on the Arts and the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures. Lynn Van Voorhees has taught all levels of French at Lehman College for many decades. She taught English as a foreign language at Lehman's Japan campus and began the study abroad program at Lehman, later becoming assistant dean of the Office of Global Initiatives. Following her retirement, she taught French language courses at Montclair State University and then returned to Lehman as an adjunct, where she continues to teach French, and since March 2020, in fully online synchronous courses. Christina Michael is an assistant professor of English at Hostos Community College. She is on the development team for Manifold, a digital publishing platform, and she is a member of the editorial collective of the Journal of Instructional Technology and Pedagogy. Professor Michael's teaching and scholarship revolves around 19th century American literature and writing, the digital humanities, architecture, and city space. She has published in major academic journals. Jacqueline DeSanto is the professor, chair of the education department, and coordinator of teacher education at Hostos Community College. Among her research interests are the attitudes and perceptions of both students and faculty toward online teaching and learning. She is the co-chair of the Educational Technology Leadership Council, and as such, she has mentored dozens of colleagues on best practices in online teaching, including me. So I want to welcome all of you and thank you for joining me. What I thought it would be nice if we just went around once just to hear from each of you where you are in terms of what kind of teaching had you been doing during the pandemic, what are you doing right now in this kind of post-pandemic mode, we hope. Just tell us a little about your experiences. Charles, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Linda, and hello, everybody. It's great to be with everyone. Yeah, I mean, I think I, like probably everybody on the screen, we all responded to the jolt that happened in March 2020. And I had never taught an online class. I had wanted to take a training at some point. And I was surprised that, we're able to figure it out, that I was able to figure it out. So, that first semester and those years were both, I think they were both synchronous, the classes, but then we learned of the asynchronous and then I got assigned that. So those working in those two modalities were interesting because I, like being in the classroom and like connecting with students, I think as most professors like to do. And it was difficult, I think, for me making that adjustment, of course. And for students, I think there was a lot of doubt if I was doing the job that I needed to do in reaching the students and teaching. Currently, I'm doing both. I'm back in the classroom and I'm also teaching an online synchronous class. And yeah, and it's, I think I'll maybe start the joy, but it's been joyful from the very first day being back in the classroom with students and being able to teach them, and particularly I'll say the students that I'm teaching an English 100 class, which is a class where the students need more time and attention, and you get to work with a tutor. And I felt that was so lost in the online. So I felt like it depends on the class. I just felt like that was one class that if I have the choice, I will never teach online again. And then the creative writing class kind of worked sometimes as a asynchronous. There was some that could work. But yeah, but I think it's, mixed. I think it's not a cookie cutter for me. It's a nice variety of what might work best.
Great, thank you. Christina, how about you?
Sure. So in spring 2020, it was my second semester at Hostos as an assistant professor. But I got my PhD at the Graduate Center of CUNY. So I'd been in the CUNY system for years. And I had also, as a graduate student, been an instructional technology fellow at the School of Professional Studies, which is a school that is 80% online at CUNY. And in my capacity as an ITF there, I trained faculty on best practices for teaching online and the use of technology in their classroom. And I had taught online for SPS for 8 years. So I was very comfortable teaching asynchronous online. However, the chaos of switching in the middle of the semester was very difficult. And part of it is because usually, as we've found out since then, usually the way an online class works is you design it ahead of time. You build out the entire course before you're running it. It's not something that it is not recommended that you build the course as the course is proceeding. And it just took an enormous amount of time to build out each week as you were going. So, fall 2020 I found was smoother. I taught asynchronous online classes then. And then spring 2021, I was on parental leave. And so I came back fall 2021, was teaching asynchronous again. And it felt like, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what other people think, but it really felt like fall 2021 was the most, everyone was the most frazzled. That I don't know, I was coming back from parental leave, but I really felt like my students were exhausted, and all my faculty, like everyone I knew on faculty, was really exhausted from the grind of teaching, I think, online and trying synchronous and asynchronous online teaching. So like Charles, I'm back in the classroom this semester for the first time. I'm teaching the same class, 2 online sections and 1 in-person section. And I also just felt great joy coming back into the classroom. And I feel like the students are excited to be there, they walk out and they always say, thank you, professor, which it didn't, always happen before. But I feel like there's a real exuberance about being back in the classroom. And I really like that. So yeah, I'll be really interested to hear about everyone's experiences.
Great, thank you. Lynn, how about you? Teaching foreign language, that caught my attention. How do you do that online?
Sometimes I wonder how I do it at all, but it is foreign. So, but I've done that for decades. That is what I do. And the only time I taught English, it was English as a foreign language when we were in Japan at the Lehman Japan campus, actually. But Lehman was always proud of the fact that it had a lot of online classes before the pandemic and a lot of hybrid classes. And because I was also doing administrative work full-time at some point, I was teaching hybrids. And I guess I would say that hybrids are my favorite. Hybrids with 1 in person, in class, face-to-face, and 1, I guess, asynchronous, just assignments and catching up on that. That works in an advanced class relatively well. Teaching online. So in March of 2020, I was teaching only one section of a beginning French course, I guess the second semester of it. But we were lucky because we happened to have a book that is basically made for online teaching. It had everything from pronunciation of every single word and exercise in it, and all kinds of different exercises. So it wasn't such a strain for the students, except it was a shock nevertheless. Normally when we teach, we get to the point where we have directions or you talk about things, and I would always ask how you get around the Lehman campus. Well, I realized some of those students had never set foot on the Lehman campus, and that's still true. And that threw all of us, the students and me alike, for a loop. So I agree with Christina, who said that fall of 21 was maybe the hardest. I'm not sure why. I think because we all thought we'd be back. And all of a sudden, Omicron came, and forget it, everything was worse than it was, with no end in sight. So the students were not happy. My students didn't want to come back either. They were very scared to come back. And when I polled them for this spring, most of them, I know we claim we're 70-30% on in person. I don't know if that's true. Certainly not my students. Some of them are taking one course, some two. More people taking science have to be back, but not necessarily the humanities. So they're cautious. My students are cautious, and they were appreciative of the fact that the online synchronous allowed us to meet, at least this way. Mm-hmm. What we had a lot of problem with in the language was cheating on exams and things. They would make a WhatsApp for the class, and they would happily chat away during the exam. And we tried to devise all kinds of things. So the last thing I devised in the fall was 3 in-person exams. So I gave them 2, and then the final in class. And actually it was very nice to see them. And as one of them said to me, "Oh my God, you're so short," which is true. But I said, I'd like to be able to recognize you someday if I ever have to write, or when I have to write a recommendation for you. I would like to know who I'm talking about. So, but teaching in person with a mask doesn't sound all that good to me, especially if I'm teaching a foreign language and its pronunciation. Right. So I'm very mixed, very torn. I was very glad for the protection of CUNY that allowed us, or me, to teach. I have mixed feelings. I would say there's one thing that I found in the online that was positive. The shy students seem to feel more open to participation and we're in their rooms, we're in their house, we're in all places, and they're in mine. And so they know I have dogs. The dog climbs on the computer sometimes, it's a very different kind of intimacy despite the remoteness of it.
We're going to talk about some of those differences in just a moment, some of those key things that people talk about. So thank you for helping us segue into that in just a moment. Jackie, I want to go to you and hear your perspective.
Thank you, Linda. My 3 colleagues here all hit on points that were very important to me. I was only teaching, I think, 1 course that semester, and it was a course that I dearly love to teach in person. I have taken 8 online courses myself as part of my doctorate degree, so I was used to the idea of not having contact. I experienced what the students experience. But as Linda said, it's lonely, and you realize at a certain point, spring 2019, we were panicked. All we wanted to do was be safe and keep going. But by the time we got to this past fall, I honestly said exactly what Lynn said. I have no clue who these students are. I wouldn't recognize them if they sat next to me. And that was so sad, because even when I taught only online, and there were a couple semesters where I did pre-COVID, they'd pop into my office and say, "Hi, do you know who I am?" And I'd say, "No clue." And I'd say, "That's you." And then I knew when I'd read the paper or her discussion board, I now have a face to put in front of me. That didn't happen here, because even new colleagues, I have no idea who they are. You don't see anybody. I had been teaching online for quite some time, so the transition was very easy for me as far as preparing my class. Most of the courses I have already prepared as an online course, so I could just pick one and go with it. But it was maintaining communications, trying to figure out how to get a connection going where a student would feel comfortable enough coming to me and saying, "I'm in trouble, I'm lost, you have to help me, I don't want to fail the class." In person, they stay behind, they come early, they pop in. But here, there was no medium for them until we made the outreach. And doing that for 100 students is really difficult when you're dealing with panic and you're dealing with fear and you're dealing with chaos. And it was chaotic, particularly in the fall for students and for faculty alike. The fact that I'm involved in training faculty kind of helped me hide a little bit, because most of the time my colleagues would ask a question that I wasn't sure of. So I'd get the secondhand knowledge. I'd get to learn it by osmosis. we learned quite a bit about what we were good at, but we also learned what we missed, and that was having someone to say, I'm stuck here. Having trouble in cheating. Are you having trouble with cheating in your course? What are you doing? I need to know now. My test is in an hour. That immediacy is lacking in some regards. I mean, some it's an email and it's quick, but when you're having a problem, you really just need someone to talk to. That was gone, and that made it very, very painful.
Thank you, Jack. You've all raised a number of issues about curriculum, how do you develop a good online curriculum? And then, of course, these very factors that people always compare the modalities with. So I want to throw some of them out there and then just jump in if there's one of them. I know that Lynn already mentioned some of those factors about participation. So we always hear about attention and attendance. The irony, of course, right now is that attendance in person is not so great, and students have been clamoring for online. But I'd like to hear from you. What do you see in terms of student engagement, attendance, attention in those two different environments, online and face-to-face?
I think for me, I think the online, challenges is we can't require our students to be on camera. And so for me, I think a lot of times it's a bigger effort to try to include students that are a name in a black box. And so it's a different thing like in a classroom, and they'll say, all right, Karen, what do you think about this? Because Karen's been silent and there's no response, there's nothing. So I think one of the challenges is that, and then I end up feel like I'm teaching to like 6 students who are on camera and are participating and talking. So I think, that's one of the things that I worry about, like how to reach students, particularly in an online environment when there isn't a requirement. Sometimes and I say unmute, use the chat, try to use all of the things that are available for them to participate. But I still have this feeling that sometimes on the online environment that I lose students.
Anybody else?
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt that way teaching asynchronously. I'm sorry, synchronous online classes, where there was, 4 students who would talk, and I had that same experience of calling on students and it just being silence because they weren't there. And, and even just the experience of asking a question and not being able to see if anyone is thinking about answering, or, like if it's registered, like you don't know when to ask another question or to move on, or, I found that really difficult with synchronous online teaching. But something that I've come to really appreciate about asynchronous teaching online is in terms of like attention and attendance, that in some ways, I teach in the English department, and I have them annotate texts together, and it's something that they get graded on every week, and they can respond to each other. And so this is the way that we have like class discussions about the text. And one thing that I find really interesting about this is that every student who is attending has to be actively engaging with the text in order to have attended. And so in that way, I actually feel like more students are engaging with the text than I would have often in a lecture class where, every student doesn't say something about, their reading of a passage or something like that. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed about that aspect of online teaching. And it's something that I'm actually doing in my face-to-face class now as well.
That's an interesting perspective. Thank you. Now, Lynn, you had mentioned already that participation, that sometimes the shyer student, that sometimes participation is maybe better in the online environment. But what did you think? So tell us a little bit about also what you thought about, attendance and attention, and really how students learn that foreign language in the different modalities, since you've had decades of teaching foreign language. Days.
Well, I think that they don't learn as well online as they do in the class. But given the fact that we were online, we tried to make as good a situation as we could possibly do. And so we use the chat. The other day I did this to them. They were not participating in any way. And so I muted myself, and I had a horrible picture up there, but I muted myself and I took away the live image. And so I could hear them saying, wait, what happened to the professor? What happened to the professor? And one of them said she did it on purpose because we weren't answering. So it was a little better after that. But now I used to just wait for them. And now I told them, if I don't hear from you, and I call on you and I don't hear from you in 2 seconds, 3 seconds, I just go to the next person. But to me, you're not there then. So you don't get any attendance for that day. Of course, I don't do that, but, but they don't know that. So I think attendance hasn't been so bad, but focused attendance has been a problem sometimes. They're working, sometimes you don't know they're in a lab and or in a pharmacy and they're working and they have customers in there. And we don't know where they are really. And I think it's really hard on them. And yet they were not eager to come back necessarily. They said they were eager to come back, but then they didn't register for those classes.
We see that,
So,
right?
yeah.
Now, Jackie, you have the perspective of working with faculty who are new to this, like me, people who called you up with questions that I would be so embarrassed if you ever released the tapes of my questions, like, what's the arrow for? But that said, since you are really interested in the perspectives that faculty have, tell us what you've learned about our perspectives on these modalities and learning about them.
I've learned that faculty egos are fragile because in this case, they were reduced to, let's say, a first grade level. It wasn't even something out of their field. It was what's become a basic skill. And I remember teaching, I used to teach all kinds of crazy consulting classes. I had to teach an online seminar back in the 90s. I didn't know how to turn on the desktop. And I had to call the person that hired me and she says, why did I hire you? I said, I don't know, but I never had to turn it on. It was always on. And that's what I remembered. We can't assume that because we have cell phones and we live in such a technical world, people use Ubers, they order food in, but they don't use these skills. So why would they have them? And people who I have great respect for, like you, Linda, ask very basic questions because you couldn't go forward without it. I don't even remember what you asked me because it was not as strange as you think it was. But it was a fast-paced scaffolding. We didn't have the luxury of a 2-year degree. We had to be ready for September. And for many, in our case at Hostos, we ran 4, I think, 3-week online initiatives. 3 weeks to learn new skills is crazy, but yet people had to. We had no choice. So, and I think of, as Lynn was mentioning, attendance, you have students that are doing a 15-week course in half the time because they're not there half the time. What I've tried is connecting it, making it personal. Instead of saying, well, compare this theorist to that theorist, compare this one theorist to what you've experienced. The minute you bring them in, their needs, their silliness, their faults, whatever they're concerned about, and let them talk from their perspective, they're in. Even if they're not in physically or on screen, they'll do the work, they'll reach out to you. And I'm hearing from faculty, online classes, blank screens, nobody's there, you know, they're off making coffee or something and they have no idea you're talking to them. In person, they registered, but they're not showing up. That's life now. People are just so distracted by things that are more important that we want to do with them in that minute. We have to find a way to hook them so they come back when it's convenient and can make the course work for them. So I learned that from all of you during the initiative. Where are you? What are you looking for? Tell me. I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. And we're trying to do that with our students. So you talk to me.
I think you've really hit on, I think what's so confusing to all of us is that the students are not coming back. Now where faculty are saying, oh, we want more classes online to bring them back. Campuses want them back online because of financial problems. And yet on the other hand, we're also torn because we don't think the teaching experience is as good online. We are running out of time, if you can believe that. So I have to ask you, are we in the return to normal? And what do we need to do now going forward to support students? Anybody? What do you say? Jackie?
We need to be flexible. I can't define normal. I think normal is going to change continuously. And I think we need to learn to be flexible and we need to train students to be flexible.
Okay, anybody else have thoughts about this? Lynn?
They have to trust us too when we say we're flexible, when we try to show that we're flexible. We are human, just like I usually pick a techie or a couple of techies in my class, and I let them help me, even if I don't need it. And so they are more connected to me that way. And I tell them that they're really helpful. They help their fellow students. And I think that goes a long way toward helping them. And humor, of course, you can't live without humor. Certainly not in a classroom of any kind. Do I think we're going back to normal? I don't know. It depends on Omicron and who knows what. I don't want to teach in a mask.
So
I know we don't need them anymore, I know, but.
all right, you don't need them anymore. Yes, Charles.
I think we've learned some things, right? So there are certain things that we've learned from both modalities, from asynchronous and synchronous, that I bring into the classroom. I think the way I do assignments is different. I think the way we share information is different. The way I'm using Blackboard is different, you know.
Can you say a little bit specifically what you do a little bit differently? I know we only have a minute or two, but.
Yeah, I mean, basically like assignments. I would think I always schedule assignments around the time like of class, but now I can schedule them anytime, so they can, you know, there was some freedom about when the student needs to get the assignment in. So that might be that's one thing that I'm doing a little more differently in the classroom that I've taken from the online experience, specifically asynchronous.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you've learned that you want to share and let people know about?
Myself, yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is really how to incorporate technology more into the classroom and into the day-to-day of how we communicate, how they submit assignments, how I grade. So all this stuff creates more, I think there's just more expansiveness. I think it creates more work because then, you know, we're grading all the time where they can find, you know, information all the time. But I think that flexibility of that I think the technology is offering, I think that's using video, you know, all kinds of things that we did in the online environment that I'm using in class.
We're going to have to wrap up, so I'm just going to ask each of you just say a phrase quickly. Do you prefer to be teaching face-to-face or online? Christina, what do you say?
I really like a mix. I like to do both online and in person.
Okay, Charles?
I'm going to say it depends. I prefer the human experience is the classroom, but depends on the class.
Okay, Lynn?
I'll take a hybrid.
Take a hybrid.
Yes.
Jackie? Jackie, you're muted. Can't hear you.
I apologize. I will take a hybrid as well, but I am curious about high flex.
Oh, we don't have time to talk about high flex, but I can only say the research I've seen is not good, but that gives me the last word. Okay, so I want to thank you all for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation. So again, Professor Jackie DeSanto, Lynn Van Voorhees, Christina Michael, Charles Rice Gonzalez, you've been terrific, and thank you so much. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to cunyedcast@gmail.com.